The stars hung still in the quiet of space, the vastness of the galaxy stretching out in every direction. Captain Zara stood at the center of the bridge of her flagship, staring out into the void. Her fleet, powerful and stealthy, had been on the run for years. They had struck fear into countless species across the galaxy, and their reputation was well known. Theirs was a fleet that could disappear into the darkness of space without a trace, leaving destruction in their wake. Zara had always believed that no one could ever catch them. Her fleet had evaded countless attempts at capture. They had become experts in hiding, using their advanced cloaking technology to stay hidden from even the most sophisticated sensors. For years, they had been untouchable, slipping through enemy lines and attacking with brutal efficiency. Zara's confidence was unshakable. She had seen her enemies tremble, heard the whispers of fear as her fleet struck without warning. Tonight, however, was different. Zara stood in front of the large viewport, watching as the distant stars twinkled softly. She had just received word that a new mission was about to begin, an offensive that would strike at the heart of a human colony. She knew that their ships, built for speed and destruction, would be able to take down any defenses the humans had in place. There was no way they could fail. But as Zara turned to leave the bridge, a sudden beeping from the control panel caught her attention. One of the junior officers stood up, their face pale with unease. "Captain, we've detected a strange signal," the officer said, voice trembling slightly. "It's faint, but it's coming from just beyond the asteroid belt." Zara frowned. Could it be another fleet? A trap? The officer shook their head. "No, Captain. The signature is too weak for any fleet. It's almost like a ghost signal. We can't even get a clear reading." Zara felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Something didn't feel right. "Scan it again," she ordered. "Something is off. It could be a trap. But it's better to be cautious." The officer complied, fingers flying over the controls as the scans ran once more. Zara's eyes narrowed as the signal flickered on the screen, weak but persistent. It didn't match anything in their database. The officer's hands shook slightly as they tried to enhance the signal. "It's gone," the officer said, looking confused. The signal just vanished. Zara stood still for a moment, considering. She had always trusted her instincts, and they were telling her that this wasn't just some random glitch. It felt deliberate, like something was waiting in the shadows. "Keep scanning," Zara commanded, her voice cold with determination. "We're not leaving until we find out what's out there." Just as she finished speaking, another alarm went off. The entire ship shook violently. A loud crash echoed through the corridors, followed by the blaring sound of sirens. Crew members scrambled, trying to maintain control, but the ship was under attack. Zara's heart raced as she tried to make sense of what was happening. They were in a secure part of the galaxy, miles from any human colonies. How could they be under attack? "Report," Zara barked, grabbing hold of the command console. The officer on duty stared at the monitors, his face a mix of shock and confusion. It's a ship, Captain. But it's not like any ship I've ever seen. It's huge, and it appeared out of nowhere." Zara's blood ran cold. "What do you mean, appeared out of nowhere? Where did it come from?" "We can't trace it," the officer said, voice trembling. "It's as if it just materialized in front of us. We didn't see it coming." Zara's mind raced. They had never encountered anything like this before. A ship that appeared from the shadows without warning. No fleet could move that fast, not without leaving some trace. Yet here it was, an unknown human warship, sitting in front of them like a predator watching its prey. The officer's voice broke through Zara's thoughts. "Captain, it's charging weapons." Zara's breath caught in her throat. All hands braced for impact. The crew scrambled to their stations as the ship's massive cannons powered up, their glowing tips aimed directly at Zara's fleet. She watched in stunned silence as the human warship fired. The first shot was a warning, a single blast that sent a shockwave across the space, rattling the entire fleet. Zara could feel the vibrations underfoot, The weight of the power behind that single blast. "This is impossible," Zara muttered under her breath, her mind spinning. The ship had appeared from nowhere, and now it was preparing to destroy them. The human warship loomed in front of them, a towering shadow in the endless dark. The crew was in disarray, unsure of how to react. Zara had faced countless battles in her career, but she had never encountered anything like this. She had always believed that her fleet was untouchable, that no one could find them, let alone defeat them. But now, as she looked at the massive ship in front of her, Zara realized that they had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were paying the price. Zara's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair as she looked at the human warship. What would they do next? Would the humans destroy them without mercy, or was there something more to this sudden appearance? One thing was certain. Zara and her fleet had just entered a battle they never saw coming. The blast from the human warship had shaken Zara's entire fleet. The warning shot, though not deadly, was a clear message. "We are ready to destroy you." As the crew scrambled to assess the damage, Zara stood in the center of the bridge, her mind racing. She had faced countless battles, but this was unlike anything she had ever encountered. A warship appeared out of nowhere, its weapons primed and ready. Whoever controlled that ship was playing a game they'd never expected to be part of. The tension in the room was palpable. The communications officer worked feverishly, trying to get a better raid on the unknown ship. Zara turned toward them, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Any response? Can we contact them?" The officer shook their head. "No, Captain. It's like they've blocked our transmissions. We can't send a message to them, and they aren't responding to ours." Zara's frustration grew. She wasn't used to being in the dark, and the uncertainty was gnawing at her. The human ship hovered in front of them, a behemoth in the cold expanse of space. Its size was overwhelming, and its dark silhouette seemed to mock the fleet's own power. No one had ever seen a human ship like this before. It was unlike anything in their records. Suddenly, the ship fired again. This time, the blast hit one of the smaller vessels in Zara's fleet. The explosion was deafening, sending debris scattering through space. The ship had no chance. Its shields had been too weak, and the human warship's firepower was overwhelming. "Damn it," Zara cursed under her breath. "Return fire. Target their weapons." The crew sprang into action, weapon systems powering up as Zara's fleet retaliated. But even as they launched their attacks, they could see it. The human warship was moving with an agility that shouldn't have been possible for a ship its size. It dodged and weaved, avoiding most of their fire, and countered with blasts that tore through their shields like they were paper. Zara's pulse quickened. They had never faced anything like this. She had assumed that their technology would make them untouchable, but now it was clear. The humans had something far more advanced than anything they had ever encountered. The battle was becoming a losing one. "We need to retreat," one of the officers shouted, their voice cracking with fear. "We can't win this fight." But Zara's mind was made up. Retreating wasn't an option. If they ran now, they would lose face, and the reputation of her fleet would be shattered. She had always been the one to strike fear into her enemies, but now she was the one who was being hunted. The thought of running, of retreating from a human warship, was humiliating. "No," Zara said firmly, her voice like steel. "We stand our ground. Keep fighting. We cannot show weakness." But deep down, Zara knew the truth. They were outmatched. The human warship's precision, its strength, and its speed were all too much for them to handle. The battle wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for respect, for their very place in the galaxy. The human ship fired again, and this time, it wasn't a warning shot. It was a direct hit, destroying another ship in Zara's fleet. The explosion was massive, and the shockwave rippled through space, sending debris in every direction. Panic spread throughout Zara's crew as they scrambled to keep their remaining ships intact. "Captain," one of the officers cried, "we need to retreat now. or we'll lose everything." But Zara stood still, her eyes locked onto the human warship. The fear in her crew's voices only added to the pressure she felt. They were watching her, waiting for a decision. If she retreated now, they would lose their pride and reputation. But if they kept fighting, they would lose their lives. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud, booming voice that echoed across the bridge. It was a voice unlike anything they had ever heard before, a voice that sent a chill down Zora's spine. "This is your final warning," the voice said, calm and cold, as if speaking to them like insects. "Surrender now, or we will destroy every last one of you." Zara's heart skipped a beat. It was the voice of the human captain. They had been communicating with them this whole time, through the ship's advanced communication system. The cold, emotionless tone made Zora's blood run cold. There was no negotiation here. No room for diplomacy. This was war. The human warship moved once more, closer now, its cannons primed and ready. The crew could feel the impending doom in every fiber of their being. Zara knew that they couldn't hold out much longer. The human ship was relentless, and they had already lost too many ships. "Retreat," Zara finally ordered, her voice strained with the weight of the decision. "All ships, retreat. Get us out of here." But as the fleet turned to flee, something inside Zara snapped. This wasn't just about pride anymore. It wasn't about losing face or reputation. This was about survival. And in the end, Zara knew that they had made one huge mistake. They had underestimated the humans. The human ship fired once more, a final blast that ripped through the remnants of Zora's fleet. In that moment, Zara understood. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. As the remnants of Zora's fleet scattered across space, the once proud armada now in full retreat, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The human warship loomed like a dark cloud in the distance, its weapons still primed and ready. The human captain had made their intentions clear. This was not a battle of negotiation. This was a war. Zara's mind raced. The decision to retreat had been the only option, but it was a bitter pill to swallow. Her fleet, once a symbol of fear and power, was now a broken shadow of its former glory. Ships had been lost, and lives had been extinguished in the blink of an eye. There had been no mercy shown by the humans, and Zara's pride had taken a blow that she could never undo. The communications officer's voice broke through the silence on the bridge. "Captain, we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet. They're scattered across the sector." Zara's chest tightened as she fought the urge to slam her fist against the console. "Can we regroup? Can we call for reinforcements?" Another officer shook their head. "Not possible, Captain. The human warship is jamming our signals. Any attempt to call for help will be blocked. We're on our own." Zara stood still, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and plans, but none of them seemed to offer any hope. She had been trained for this, trained for combat and strategy, but nothing in her training had prepared her for a foe like this. The humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. Their ships, their tactics, their sheer strength were unparalleled. "Captain, the human ship is closing in," an officer called out, voice filled with dread. "They're almost within firing range." Zara gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles turning white. The enemy wasn't just attacking. They were hunting, playing a game they'd already won. She could feel the weight of the situation, the unbearable pressure of knowing that she had led her fleet into a trap. And now, it seemed like there was no escape. "What are our options?" Zara asked, her voice calm but laced with frustration. The officer looked over the readouts, trying to find some way out of the situation. "We could attempt to jump to a nearby system, but it's risky. The human warship has been tracking our movements, and it could follow us instantly." Zara thought about it for a moment. A jump to another system was their only hope, but it carried the risk of being caught in the middle of nowhere, stranded without the resources to fight back. The human ship was fast, and if it could track them, they would have no chance. The tension in the air was thick. The crew awaited their captain's decision. Zara knew that whatever she chose, it would change the course of this battle, and perhaps the course of the war itself. "We have no choice," Zara said, her voice steady but firm. "Prepare for a jump. Get us out of here." As the crew scrambled to engage the ship's jump drive, Zara glanced at the view screen. The human warship was now just moments away from opening fire. The odds were slim, but this was their only chance to survive. If they could escape, they could regroup, rethink their strategy, and find a way to fight back. The engines roared to life, and the ship trembled as it powered up for the jump. Zara could feel the tension building in every corner of the ship, and for a brief moment, it felt as though the entire universe was holding its breath. But just as the jump drive was about to engage, an explosion rocked the ship. A direct hit from the human warship. The bridge lights flickered, and alarms blared as the ship's shields collapsed under the force of the blast. The jump drive sputtered and died, leaving them trapped in the vast emptiness of space. "Captain, shields are down. We can't jump," another officer shouted, their voice trembling with panic. Zara's mind raced. They were running out of time. If they didn't act fast, the human warship would finish what it had started. The crew was looking to her for direction, and Zara knew that their survival depended on her next move. The situation was dire, and if they didn't find a way to escape, they would all be dead. "We need to buy time," Zara said, her voice low but resolute. "Engage the remaining weapons. Let's give them a fight they won't forget." The crew hesitated, unsure of what good it would do. But Zara's words gave them the strength to keep going. With their remaining weapons, they unleashed everything they had at the human warship. Blasts lit up the dark expanse of space as the human ship absorbed the barrage without flinching. It was clear they were outmatched, but Zara refused to give up. "Do whatever it takes," she said, her eyes burning with determination. "We fight until the end." For a moment, the crew held their breath as they awaited the human ship's next move. The warship hovered just beyond their reach, its weapons primed for the final strike. But to Zara's surprise, the human ship didn't fire. Instead, a transmission came through, one she had hoped never to hear. "This is your last warning. Surrender now, or we will destroy you all." Zara's heart raced. The humans were giving them an ultimatum. Surrender or die. It was a cruel choice, one that left her with only one question. What would she do next? Zara's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the flashing lights on the bridge. The crew scrambled to keep their ship intact, each movement frantic but precise. The human battleship loomed in front of them, its weapons charged and ready to strike. They had no shields left, no way to escape, and no allies on the horizon. All they had was their determination to survive, and even that seemed to be slipping away with each passing second. "Captain, they're locking onto us." The voice of the weapons officer crackled through the comms, panic lacing the words. "They'll fire any second." Zara's mind raced, her thoughts scattered. In this moment, she couldn't afford to make mistakes. She had been in countless battles before, but none like this. The humans were relentless, methodical, calculating, and terrifyingly efficient. Every maneuver they made, every shot they fired, was with purpose. It was as though they had anticipated their every move, as if they knew what would happen next before Zara could even think about it. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Zara commanded, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. She gripped the armrests of her chair, trying to steady her nerves. "All hands, brace for impact." The crew scrambled to their stations, but deep down, Zara knew they were running out of options. Their ship was damaged beyond repair, and there was nowhere to run. The human warship was too powerful, its weapons too advanced. If they didn't find a way out of this, they would all be dead within moments. But just as Zara was about to give the order to prepare for the inevitable, something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on the scanners, faint but growing stronger by the second. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a blip in the vast emptiness of space. But as it grew closer, Zora's eyes widened in disbelief. Another ship, but not just any ship. This one was different, larger, more imposing, and it was heading straight toward them. "Captain, there's something else out there," the communications officer shouted, her voice trembling with shock. "It's another ship, and it's massive." Zora's heart skipped a beat. What kind of ship could be larger than the human battleship? She had thought they were alone, with no hope of rescue. Yet here, at the most critical moment, a new player had entered the game. The massive ship emerged from the shadows, its hull glistening in the dim light of the distant stars. It was unlike anything Zora had ever seen. Its design was sleek, streamlined, and seemingly designed for maximum intimidation. It was clear that this was no ordinary vessel. The unknown ship was advanced, more advanced than anything Zora's people had ever encountered. As the mysterious ship drew closer, Zora could feel the air on the bridge grow heavier, the tension palpable. The crew watched in awe as the new ship aligned itself with Zora's fleet, positioning itself between the human warship and their vessel. "What is it doing?" one of the officers whispered in disbelief. Zora didn't have an answer. She was just as confused as the rest of her crew. But something about this new ship felt different. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't even moving in a way that suggested it was preparing for battle. Instead, it was positioning itself as a shield, something Zora had never seen before. The human battleship, for the first time, seemed to hesitate. Its weapons flickered, then powered down momentarily. The crew aboard Zora's ship was left staring, confused but hopeful. Could this be a rescue? Could this mysterious ship be here to help them? Before Zora could make a decision, the comms officer's voice cut through the silence. "Captain, they're speaking. It's coming through." Zora's heart leaped in her chest as she heard the faintest crackle of a voice. The words were clear, but the accent was unfamiliar, stern, commanding, and heavy with authority. "This is Captain Lyrics of the Ethran Dominion." The voice boomed across the bridge, sending a wave of shock through Zora's crew. "By the orders of the Dominion, your fleet is under our protection. Stand down and prepare to be escorted to safety." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The Dominion. Zora had heard of them. Rumors of an ancient and powerful civilization, a faction so powerful that they could shift the balance of power in the galaxy with a single command. But no one had ever seen them. No one had ever even confirmed their existence. And now, out of nowhere, they were here, intervening in a war they had no reason to be involved in. The human warship, which had been preparing to finish them off, now seemed to be backing off. Its weapons powered down entirely, and for the first time since the battle began, there was silence. The human ship did not retreat, but it did not advance either. It was as if the human captain was unsure of what to do. Zora stood frozen in her chair, her mind reeling. This was not just a battle. This was a turning point. The mysterious Ethran Dominion had arrived at the exact moment they were about to be destroyed. And now, the humans were faced with an enemy they did not understand, a threat that could rival their own power. "Captain, what are your orders?" the communications officer asked hesitantly, breaking Zora's concentration. Zora's eyes never left the view screen, where the two massive ships stood face to face. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, but she knew this was the moment of truth. The humans had been forced to make a decision, fight or retreat, and Zora knew that with the Ethran Dominion on their side, the balance of power had shifted. But the question remained, what was the Dominion's real goal? Why had they chosen to intervene now? Zora didn't know the answers, but one thing was clear: this battle was far from over. And with the Ethran Dominion entering the fray, the galaxy would never be the same. The tension on the bridge of Zora's ship was unbearable. The moment the Ethran Dominion's message had crackled through the speakers, everything had changed. The human warship, once a formidable enemy, now hesitated, as though unsure of how to proceed. Zara could feel the weight of their uncertain future pressing down on her. The crew was equally tense, their faces a mix of confusion, fear, and cautious hope. "Captain, what should we do?" the weapons officer asked, her voice barely above a whisper, still uncertain of the situation. Zara didn't have an immediate answer. The Dominion had arrived out of nowhere, and their intervention had turned the tide of the battle. But Zara had spent enough years in command to know that no victory was guaranteed. The humans, despite their retreat, were still out there, watching, calculating. They might not have retreated for long. The hum of the engines echoed through the ship as Zara stood from her chair and walked slowly to the viewport. The human battleship still loomed in the distance, its hulking form casting a long shadow over the stars. But now, another shadow had appeared. The Atheran Dominion ship, massive, imposing, and filled with a sense of mystery, hovered between them like an immovable mountain. Zara took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing mind. She had to think carefully. The arrival of the Atheran Dominion had raised more questions than answers. Why had they intervened? What did they want? And what would the humans do now? She glanced over her shoulder at the crew. Their eyes were fixed on her, waiting for a command. Zara knew that her next decision could decide whether they would live or die. She had led her people through many battles, but this situation was unlike any she had faced before. The Atheran Dominion's presence changed everything. "We need to find out who they are and what they want," Zara said, her voice steady, but full of the uncertainty she was trying to mask. "Send a message to the Dominion. Tell them we're ready to cooperate." Her words seemed to echo in the quiet of the bridge. The communications officer didn't hesitate and quickly began transmitting the message. Zara's mind raced as she watched the human ship, wondering if they were about to make a move or simply wait, like them. The silence stretched on, the seconds feeling like hours. Then, as if answering Zara's thoughts, the human warship made its move. The massive ship powered up its engines, its weapons charging once again. The sudden movement sent a jolt through Zara's chest, and her crew instantly reacted, preparing for battle. But this time, there was a new layer to the equation. The Atheran Dominion ship shifted, its massive hull turning slowly to face the human warship. It wasn't moving in the way of an attack, but more like a stance of intimidation. The Dominion ship's weapons remained silent, but the sheer size and imposing presence of the ship made Zara feel the weight of its power. Her comms officer spoke up. "Captain, we've received a reply from the Dominion. They want us to stand by and prepare to follow their lead." Zara nodded, though her heart sank. "Tell them we're ready." The Dominion's response was swift, their communication brief and to the point. "Await further instructions. Do not engage unless ordered." Zara stood frozen for a moment, taking it all in. The human warship had taken a cautious step forward, but it was clear now that they were testing the waters. Perhaps they had never encountered a force like the Dominion before, but they were not backing down. The Atheran Dominion, it seemed, had decided to make a statement. Zara could feel it in her bones, the calm before the storm. The stillness in space was deceiving. The battle was not over. In fact, it was only just beginning. She turned to her crew, who were still on edge, ready for anything. "Get our weapons ready," she ordered, her voice firm. "But don't fire unless I give the command. We need to be prepared for whatever happens next." As her crew scrambled to prepare, Zara's thoughts raced. The Atheran Dominion had made their intentions clear. They were here to assert their power. But what would the humans do now? Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they were caught in the middle of something much bigger than they had anticipated. A war between the Dominion and the humans was inevitable, but how would they fit into it? The Dominion's presence was like a looming shadow over the battlefield, but Zara had learned long ago that shadows could deceive. It wasn't just the Dominion's size or strength that would determine the outcome. It was the strategy, the cunning, and the decisions made in the heat of battle that would tip the scales. Just as she was about to turn back to the view screen, the silence was broken by a series of sharp, crackling sounds from the comms. The message came through in a harsh, robotic voice, cold and emotionless. "We are under attack," the voice said. "The human forces have launched a full assault on our position. Prepare for combat." Zara's heart skipped a beat as the words settled in. The humans were no longer hesitant. They had chosen their course of action. And now, the battle was about to escalate. "Prepare for battle," Zara shouted, her voice sharp. "This is no longer about survival. It's about winning." The crew jumped into action, weapons powering up, shields strengthening, and the air on the bridge thick with anticipation. The storm that Zara had feared had finally arrived. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The moment the human warship initiated its assault, Zara's heart raced. The war had escalated from a tentative standoff to a full-blown conflict. She could feel the intensity on the bridge, the air thick with the anticipation of what was to come. The Aetherian Dominion's presence, once a looming force of power, now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the human warship's ferocity. The Dominion had warned them not to engage, but the humans were relentless, and Zara knew the time for hesitation was over. Shields up, weapons on standby. Zara barked, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. The bridge crew scrambled into action, working in perfect sync as the hum of energy surged through the ship. Zara's eyes were fixed on the viewport. In the distance, the human warship surged forward, firing its heavy plasma cannons. The blasts illuminated the darkness of space like flashes of lightning, each shot a deadly promise of destruction. The Aetherian Dominion ship didn't move, but the air around Zara seemed to crackle with the unspoken understanding that a fight was imminent. Her tactical officer spoke urgently. "Captain, their fire is heavy. We need to retaliate." Zara felt a moment of hesitation. The Dominion's order to wait rang in her mind, but the humans were pushing their hand. There was no more time for diplomacy. Zara clenched her fists, her knuckles white as she made her decision. "Fire at will," she commanded, her voice unwavering. The ship shook as their weapons discharged. Massive beams of energy surged toward the human ship, the collision of power creating shockwaves that rippled through space. The battle was now in full swing. Zara could see the human warship's shields flicker and flare, but they were still holding strong. "Direct hit on their hull," reported the weapons officer, "but their shields are still intact." Zara's heart pounded as she watched the battle unfold. The humans were not retreating, not backing down. They had engaged with a force unlike any Zara had ever seen. Their fire was precise, each shot aimed with ruthless efficiency. The Aetherian Dominion may have been strong, but the humans had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. The human warship shifted its position, its engines glowing brighter as it surged toward Zara's ship, closing the distance rapidly. It was clear the humans were preparing for a boarding maneuver. "Brace for impact," Zara shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Prepare for a possible boarding action." The bridge crew scrambled, securing everything that wasn't nailed down, readying themselves for the worst. Zara's mind raced. A boarding action meant that the humans had made the ultimate decision. They weren't just attacking from a distance. They were coming in close, prepared to board and take over. "Enemy ship is closing in," the tactical officer yelled. "They're preparing to dock." Zara's grip tightened on the armrest of her chair. The Dominion ship remained still, waiting. Its weapons aimed at the human warship, but it didn't fire. Zara could only guess what was happening inside the minds of the Aetherian Dominion leaders. They were waiting, perhaps wondering if the humans were about to make a bold move that could change the course of the battle. The human warship closed the final distance, and before Zara could issue another order, a massive clang rang through the ship's hull. The unmistakable sound of docking clamps locking into place echoed in every corner of the vessel. The humans were here, and they had brought their fight to their doorstep. Zara immediately issued commands, her voice calm but urgent. "Seal off the boarding area. Deploy defensive units." Her orders were followed almost instantly, and her crew jumped into action. Zara moved swiftly to the command center, where she could better oversee the situation. Her pulse quickened as the sound of boots thudding on the metal floors began to echo through the ship's corridors. The human invaders were inside. Meanwhile, the human warship's captain, watching from the other side of the battlefield, was just as determined. His crew moved with precision, knowing that a battle of this magnitude could not be won with hesitation. The enemy ship, Zora's ship, had been wounded, but not enough to stop the humans from taking their fight to the heart of the vessel. Zora had not underestimated the humans. They were relentless, bold, and skilled in battle. She couldn't help but feel a twinge of respect for them, despite the deadly game they were all playing. The Dominion, still silent, was watching closely, waiting for any sign that the tide would turn in one direction or the other. They had their own interests in mind, and Zora was no longer certain that they would be the ones to dictate the flow of the battle. The corridors of Zora's ship were soon filled with the sound of laser fire, the clash of metal, and the eerie hum of advancing soldiers. Zora's mind raced as she coordinated the defense. Her crew had been trained for this, but nothing could prepare them for a full-scale invasion from an enemy that showed no sign of mercy. Zora's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden booming voice over the intercom. "We are the humans. This ship is ours now." The audacity of the message sent a chill down Zora's spine. The battle for her ship had only just begun, and in that moment, she realized that this was no longer just about survival. It was about something far greater. This was a battle for dominance, for the future of their species. As the crew continued to brace for the storm that was rapidly approaching, Zora knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened next, the galaxy would never forget the day the Deathworlders showed the universe just what they were capable of. The relentless pressure on Zora's ship didn't let up. Every inch of the vessel echoed with the sound of combat. Humans were everywhere. They had already breached several decks, and their soldiers advanced, fighting with the fury of creatures born from the most hostile of worlds. Zora's crew was doing everything they could to hold their ground, but the humans were unstoppable. They were pushing forward with a strategy and efficiency that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Zora stood at the helm, staring at the battle raging across the ship's control room. Her crew was exhausted, but they kept fighting, refusing to back down. Every part of her wanted to believe they could win, but the odds were quickly turning against them. "We can't hold them off much longer," the tactical officer said, his voice tight with strain. "They gained control of the lower levels. It's only a matter of time before they reach the command center." Zora's mind raced. This was it. If the humans took the command center, it would be over. The Dominion would lose the entire ship, and the humans would secure a massive victory. But she couldn't let that happen, not without one last attempt to shift the tides. There had to be something she could do. In a last-ditch effort, Zora turned to her bridge officers. "Activate the self-destruct sequence. We'll take them down with us if we have to." Her words were met with shocked silence. The self-destruct was a final option, one reserved for the most desperate of times. But this was that time. "No," shouted her communications officer. "We can still win. We have reinforcements on the way." Zora hesitated. She could feel the weight of her decision. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message. If they couldn't stop the humans, they had to make sure the galaxy knew that the Etheran Dominion wouldn't go down without a fight. That they had fought, tooth and nail, against an unstoppable force. She turned to the officer in charge of the ship's weapon systems. "Can we strike them before they reach the command center?" "We've got one last shot at this," the officer said grimly. "But it's risky." Zora didn't hesitate. "Do it. We have nothing to lose." The officer activated the ship's remaining weapons, sending a torrent of firepower in the direction of the advancing human forces. The blast was massive, shaking the entire ship as the energy discharged. For a moment, Zora felt a flicker of hope. The humans had been thrown back. Maybe they could still pull this off. But as quickly as the hope rose, it was dashed. The humans responded with equal intensity. Their warship, still hovering just outside the reach of Zora's weapons, unleashed a volley of missiles. The missiles crashed into Zora's ship with deadly precision, tearing through the hull and sending shockwaves that reverberated across the ship. Zora watched as the lights on the control panels flickered. The ship was already losing power. "Get to the escape pods," she ordered, her voice breaking through the chaos. "We're going down." But as her crew began to move toward the escape pods, Zora remained at her post. She wasn't about to leave her ship. Not yet. Not until she had given everything she had. The human invaders were too close now. The countdown to her ship's self-destruct had already begun, but it was too late for any of them to escape. The human warship hovered just outside her window, and Zora could see the figure of their captain standing resolutely on the bridge, his eyes locked on hers. It was as though the two of them shared a moment of mutual respect, both knowing that the end was near. The battle had been fierce, and neither side was willing to give an inch.